Ask the Mayor, your chance to ask the Mayor of Weymouth, Bob Hedlund, questions about the town of Weymouth and or anything else that you have concerns about. Ask the Mayor is pre-recorded. And now, here's Bob Hedlund.
Welcome back, everyone, once again to another episode of Ask the Mayor, featuring me, your inquisitor, on behalf of all citizens everywhere, but in particular in the town of Weymouth, Jim Melody. I'm pleased and proud, as always, to have as my host, partner,
You're
pal,
welcome.
the Mayor.
You're welcome.
Mayor Robert Hedlund, ladies and gentlemen. The Mayor is with us once again.
Glad I could be here this week with you, Jim.
Excellent,
Thank you.
Bob. Usually, I think the viewers would agree that I win the prize for most well-dressed at our tapings and shows, but today, Bob, you've stole my thunder. You've won the crown, and I'm very proud and pleased to see you with your Republican finest.
Getting away with some casual attire during the summer months, yes.
But we've transitioned seasonally. As you can tell, I have my fall colors on, and you're looking smashing as well.
Excellent tie.
By the way, by the next time we tape an episode, we'll have a new designated president will have been elected, and it's an exciting time here around here, politically and activity-wise. So we'll get right to the questions. And Bob, I don't even have to pick up the paper to read because there's 2 or 3 questions that relate to the development down at Weymouth Port. Everybody wants to know. We've touched on this before, but if there are any updates as relates to the development, real estate development down at Weymouth Port.
Are they anonymous? They names?
In fact, for the sake of it, the top 2 are one's from Ann Corcoran, another one's from Don Huskins. Both of them are related to the condos and the development down at Weymouth Port. I'll read Ann's, it's a little bit more elaborate. Could you please provide information, Bob, to the residents of Weymouth Neck as to the status of the proposed additional condos to be built behind Weymouth Port/East Bay? We would like to know how the builder will be allowed to access the capped land in this location. Robert?
So we were approached by representatives of the Iron-Tosca family, the owners of the site. They own the 2 buildings close by, not Weymouth Port, but the other 2 buildings. I forget the name of the development right now, but
East Bay. Is that the East Bay?
Yeah, East Bay.
But
there's 2 separate names for the 2 different buildings, but East Bay, right. And they have a proposal for 50-unit condominium development. They have the ability under the town's zoning and under the FAR requirement, different requirements to basically build a building that size. It's a beautiful site up there. Unfortunately, it will obscure the vista from the hill on the right-hand corner of Webb State Park. And I'm someone that uses that park quite regularly. Actually, that's the section that I prefer.
I'm down there myself. It's a great spot.
But that section is privately owned. It's been held by the family for a long time. And in response to how can they access it, actually, I'm going to just peek at that for a minute, Jim, because
he uses the phrase capped land, if you don't mind comments on that. That's the first time I've heard that phrase. What's that mean?
There's activity and use limitations on the land because of the environmental history and the regulatory history of that site. And they will have to comply with state law to access and alter the cap. They'll be required to have a licensed site professional that monitors that and complies with state law. So it'd be a very strict process for them to impact that. There's a long history, and I actually have a long involvement with the site. When I first took office in the Senate way back, early 90s, there was a proposal on that site which was actually approved by the Weymouth Planning Board before I took office in the Senate. And what was discovered was that the maps that the proponent was using included wetlands that had been, wetlands line was somewhat altered, shall we say, and that there was less acreage than the proponent thought. So the planning board approval that the town had given him in the 1980s was undone as a result of that appeal. And then we got into environmental issues associated with the site. There was an outcry from residents on a proposal. They felt that the contamination there issue hadn't been addressed. I actually got, as senator, a technical assistance grant to the Friends of Webb State Park, which they used to hire counsel to look at the issue.
Was that a private group, a citizens group, that Friends of Webb Park?
Yes, yeah, and they felt that the town wasn't being responsive at that time. They raised some issues, And they got environmental consulting involved that they hired.
We used to dig for clams down in that area with my father, I remember, in the early 60s. If they were environmental issues, I'd like to have known then.
There were significant environmental issues.
Explains how I turned out, I think,
It was
perhaps.
the site of, at one time, the largest fertilizer plant in the world.
That's the history of that spot, right before the Nike missile site for what, in the 1800s? Is it?
Bradley Fertilizer and subsequent corporate chain after that.
Wow.
But the little interesting tie-in now is that a staffer for me at the State House at the time was tasked with looking into this issue. He had some expertise in environmental law, and he discovered, the town hadn't discovered, but my staffer had discovered that the project that the Iantosca family at the time was proposing was subject to MEPA review, Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. And we filed a letter with the Secretary of Environmental Affairs suggesting that, and they agreed with us. And that triggered a whole new level of review that the residents were happy with. And subsequent to that, it stopped the project at that time. And subsequent to that, there was a cleanup at Weymouth Neck, and ConocoPhillips, a successor company to the Bradley Fertilizer, actually paid for that.
Oh, wow.
So the site has been cleaned up to who, people can interpret it different ways, but there has been a cleanup at the site. And the staffer that worked for me at the time, ironically, is now the town solicitor for the town of Weymouth, Mr. Joseph Callahan.
What a coincidence.
And when I left the State House last December, not knowing that this issue was going to arise again, I was cleaning out files, and I actually saved the file for the Weymouth Neck site, which is about this thick, which we still have now. So it's interesting. Now that this development is proposed, we went back and looked at the files, and there's a lot of, material there, shall we say. But we're limited, and the owner has rights, but we're going to see that all environmental laws are complied with, and obviously all laws, not just environmental laws, are complied with. We're asking the developer for some community benefit. Him to participate in some community benefits, and those discussions are ongoing as we tape this.
Is that where South Shore Arc is located as well, down
Yes.
in that corner? So will they be relocated?
No,
Okay.
that's
Not related?
no. It's if you go down to the site, their parcel is adjacent to, say, Weymouth Port and East Bay, kind of faces across the marina and the Hingham side of the river. And it's fenced off, so you can see where the perimeter of the fence is.
It's a tremendous spot for the citizens. It's well used, it seems to me, and I'm sure interest will be ongoing with the issue. So thanks for the update, and keep those questions coming. We'll keep everybody top of mind.
So that was good. Two birds with one stone. Two questioners. That's good.
That's what we do here at
Did
the
they
Ask
come
the
in on
Mayor
the,
show.
Did the questions come in on the same day? Do you think they were?
I didn't
Was that an
happen
organized,
to notice
or do you think it's
but here we
coincidence?
go. No, actually, they come in about 3 weeks apart, but one on September 27th and one on the 15th, just this week. So I think there's a lot of folks that are talking about it, and it sounds like it's being managed to the town's benefit at the end of the day.
And we like the non-anonymous questions. Those are good.
We'll hear it, Ask the Mayor, by the way. Please keep the questions coming in at askmayorbob@gmail.com. It's kind of like your old junior high classroom. There are no bad questions here at the Ask the Mayor show. So on that note, and with that in mind, I'd like to read you a question that I was having a hard time connecting the dots on, but maybe you can help us. The title is Elements of Health Being Ignored for the Greed of Dollars. And it looks like it was sent in anonymously, so there's a code name here. Public Beach was the name of the person who sent it in, or Bulch. I think they misspelled it.
Public Beach.
Public Bulch or Public Beach. Got it. The man was fed morphine to take away from the pain of toxins ingested by environmental contamination in products sold and approved by health licensed government-appointed humans. Then given more toxin chemicals that slowly killed his immune system, leaving this man inability to fight other bacteria, causing more injuries. There needs to be new educational materials demanded to the licensed health professionals who are allowing the casualties of approving injuring products on shelves. When will there be new educational, when is the question. So I guess the question is, when will there be new educational materials demanded of the licensed health professionals who are allowing these casualties? I guess the essential claim is some of these over-the-counter drugs are hurting some people. Is that fair for me to interpret it that way?
I'm not sure if your interpretation was correct or not. But I
Feel
guess
free to
on this
offer your
one,
own.
Maybe we try to answer everything. On this one, maybe I'll take under advisement. And we could kind of, I could reread it and analyze it a little further, and maybe come up with a question for an answer for the next show. What do you think?
I think that's fair because it's kind of an epilogue on the bottom that doesn't really help me connect the dots any better,
But it's
quite
good
honestly.
that we're happy to give residents a forum through this show to, editorialize sometimes and not just ask questions.
Yeah, we appreciate this person reaching out for the record. They CC'd the New York Times as well, so you're on the hot spot here.
Maybe I will get a call
You shall
from the, what are they,
all the news that's fit
the
to
gray
print.
lady that publishes
The
all
old
the news
gray
that fits
lady.
to print, or that used to publish all the news that's fit to print.
Well, listen, same train, same track. We've got an interesting question or outreach here by Dan Daly, who's asked for a litany of issues to be addressed. In no particular order, I'm going to offer these out to you, Mayor, with, again, the introduction of, hello, I've got a couple questions. The first one, the Chapman feasibility study. Can you go through the timeline for the study? Depending upon the outcome of the study, when do you realistically expect action to be taken? So that was big news we saw just a couple days ago. You've authorized us $1 million to develop a plan regarding the Chapman School?
Yeah, the town council approved the funding for the feasibility study the week that we're taping this show.
Well, that's exciting.
And we had hoped that we will see an approval November 19th by the Mass School Building Authority. That is contingent on them finishing up and giving us a letter on enrollment projections, which they prepare. Unfortunately, we heard word as recently as today that they may not be finished with that part of the process, which would push us back to February on the approval to advance. So that's one maybe small bump in the road, but the school building committee that we put together is doing a good job. We're kind of ahead of schedule on the things that we need to do at the town level. We have not borrowed for the feasibility study, the $1 million. That is being funded through non-borrowing sources. That is good news because a lot of towns have to borrow to do that part of the process.
I saw in the ledger, in fact, the state will reimburse you for a percentage of that fund that you've developed?
Yeah. So the bottom line is, and this is an important project for the town, not just from a physical plant standpoint where the building has to be replaced, but we're going to address grade alignment issues that have been a concern for this town, a big concern. And it's not an area where I'm an expert in, but I do think that the current grade alignment, my personal opinion is not serving us as well as a traditional middle school alignment could.
I agree with that. In fact, I've found just anecdotally and conversationally from different folks that we reach out to in other towns, I don't know of another town that has a grade structure that we have here. It's definitely be interesting.
So the bottom line is, if all goes well, and later we'll have to address funding issues, but if all goes well, you're looking at new school probably 4 to 5 years out, probably on the 5-year side of things.
Just off the cuff, how bad is that school, that Chapman School? Of course, the old Weymouth North High School for the old timers like myself in the crowd. And I remember when it was new, it was such a big deal. It was state of the art. Is it in massive disrepair? I mean, what's the rationale in your opinion?
Well, it's not my opinion, but the opinion of experts that are advising me on this one, that it's bad.
No kidding.
It has to be done. Yeah.
And so, from the outside, looking at it, looks like it's in pretty decent shape. But obviously, an upgrade would be appreciated. And of course,
so he has a multi-part question. Did you say?
But my final question relates to that redevelopment of the school. Of course, I asked off camera: is there any potential that would be named Headland High School at all at any time?
Absolutely not.
Well, then, have we considered Melody?
No. It's I would hope it would retain the same name, which was appropriately named at the time.
Lovely. All right. Yes. Moving on to Calpine. Calpine, has the town initiated legal action against them regarding their violation of the land agreement in return for tax breaks? If not, when will this happen? I'm not familiar with this issue. What's going on with Calpine?
I'll give a brief answer on this because we've devoted a lot of time to Calpine, but on this particular point, the answer is no. The interpretation thus far from outside counsel and counsel is that they are not necessarily in violation of, and I think what he's inferring that the land sale arrangement that's taking place, or they hope to take place between Spectra and Calpine. It would be a violation of the agreement that was made in 1999-2000 with then Scythe, and Calpine's a successor company that owns the site. And I am told that that is not the case as of yet. So on the advice of counsel, we haven't taken action because we're not sure there's an actionable issue there yet.
Is that necessary for Spectra to develop their plant down there? They need that
They
piece
would
of
need the
land?
land, yeah.
Oh, they would?
Yeah.
Could Calpine not sell it to them if they didn't want to? Is this an eminent domain
Calpine
thing?
could do that, but it would be an immediate eminent domain taking.
Yeah, I knew there was some...
Under the whole FERC powers that
I knew there was a few balls on the air there, but I didn't realize Calpine was connected to
and
it.
I think we mentioned it on the show in the past, or maybe a mayor's monthly forum, that I actually spoke at the last town meeting in town history against the host community agreement with Scythe because I felt that we should have control of the land. It was considered surplus by Scythe at the time. It was listed on their maps as a reserve for future development. And I thought the town had a strong case that we should receive that in that agreement. And that was voted down at town meeting.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, so had that succeeded, it wasn't my motion at town meeting, but I spoke in favor of it. It was put forward by the Four River Watershed Association, and town meeting voted it down.
Wow, that sounds interesting. We'll stay tuned, as we say.
I think a good friend of yours was chair of the committee that negotiated the agreement with Scythe and spoke against the point I was raising.
I'm just coming up to speed on it, but so far I'm in your camp on it. We'll have to, another
now you might hear from him.
It deserves additional investigation.
A very good friend of yours.
Well, we shall see then. We'll look forward to that. Just another question from the list on Dan Daly's inquiries here.
We're going to rename this the Dan Daly Show.
Well, you know what? They're all interesting in their own way. Some of these are new to me, as I said. Pilot, which looks like an acronym for something. Pilot for South Shore Hospital. The formula used to calculate the pilot was created in the early 1990s. Healthcare has changed dramatically in the past 25 years. Does your administration have any plans to renegotiate this formula? So, Bob, tell us about Pilot.
Well, we'd like to.
What is Pilot an acronym?
Payment in lieu of taxes.
Oh, no
South
kidding.
Shore
Okay.
Hospital, obviously being a nonprofit, they're paying roughly, I had the number here because we had this as a carryover question from last filming, about $720,000 to the town.
Is that voluntarily offered, or is that?
Well, yeah, theoretically, yes, it's voluntary.
Because it's not mandatory,
Payment
right?
in lieu of taxes.
Okay.
And they also have a community benefit program. Now, I'm a little bit frustrated with the South Shore Hospital. I won't get into it now because we've had a couple asks on the table with them for a long time. I actually have a meeting next week with the new president. We met with him when we first came in earlier this year. We indicated that it was our intention to try to revisit the pilot with them. So we have a follow-up on that and a couple other issues with the hospital. I'm hoping for a positive meeting. I do like the new president. Seems like a great guy. And, I've interacted now, I think, with 4 different presidents of the hospital since I've been in public service. The first one I met when I first took office, Dave Hannon, was good to work with. I hope we have more of a Dave Hannon model. I'm looking forward to next week's meeting. And in answer to Mr. Daly's question, yes, it's our intention to revisit that.
So the current rate...
Again, it's a voluntary action by the hospital. I mean, I can just use my powers of persuasion. I don't have much of a club to take out to force the issue.
But the current structure was agreed to in the 90s, in the early 90s. Is that accurate?
I believe so, yeah.
Certainly, what would you say? The hospital's doubled or tripled or quadrupled in size?
Well, yeah, but that agreement then stipulates that, with expansion, it extrapolates on the payment, but the payment is based on a formula that is very minimal to begin with. So based on the expansion, it's only been incremental increases in the pilot.
Well, it seems like I live up by there, as I know you know, and it seems like the construction cranes are always in action there, so they seem to be growing, which I think most people would view as a good thing for the town and the area. Not
to negotiate through the show, but I mean, I indicated I'm a little frustrated. I mean, I recently had an ask of the hospital that, if I walked into the local hardware store or gas station or used car lot and said, hey, can you do this for the town? They'd probably say yeah in about 2 seconds. Maybe it's the bureaucracy at the hospital, but for this recent ask, you would think that I'm asking them to amend the Constitution of the United States. So I'll leave it at that.
But things move slow, we know, in the medical
I'm hoping
arena.
we have a positive meeting next week, and maybe we can update Mr. Daly at the next taping, because we will have met with the hospital by then.
I hope I'm not putting you on the spot here. I know Partners was looking to buy that or add that to their.
Merge.
Did that ever occur? I forget how that one
That was
ended.
something that the hospital very much wanted to happen, but the state regulators denied that.
Okay, so they're still a standalone?
Correct.
Then there are standalone today? Wow. Well, there's a lot of good things going
They
on
have
up there.
affiliations and things, but a full-blown
Sure.
merger was not allowed.
Okay. Listen, the more they could do for the town, I think everybody would appreciate, and I know everybody values them as a resource, but geez, if they were to pay taxes, what number would that be during the course of the year? Is that in the
I
tens
used
of
to know the
millions?
number, I forget it, but it's
I'm sure
a
it's
significant,
ginormous, right?
staggering number.
Yeah.
And I think we mentioned people, like I was at a civic function today at lunch. I spoke to a huge group at the Elks today. Question came up about Union Point. Oh, they're getting out water. That was a question, and people don't realize. I mean, the hospital is a much bigger user of water than the entire Union Point development right now.
Oh man, I can't
So,
imagine.
there's a lot of benefit to having the hospital here, and
Yep.
certainly there's some impacts.
Yep. Well, all right, good stuff. We'll definitely stay on top of that one. Listen, as you said, it's Dan Daly's show, but they're all good questions, so I'm going to keep going down the list. He's touching all the bases, literally and figuratively, as we move over to Pingree and Level Field. I know there was a redesign plan discussion recently. Can you provide an update for those who may have missed it? The redesign
Yes, I
of
mean, this
Pingree
has
and
come
Level.
up a couple times, and I won't go into the whole history again, but, first proposed by Mayor Kay as part of a debt exclusion override, denied, and then the Conservation Commission, I didn't even realize until I took office, had actually voted it down anyway, the proposed $11 million project. So we revisited it, we've scaled it down. We came up with a much more, I think, efficient plan that still accomplishes a lot of what we want to accomplish down there from a recreational opportunity standpoint and an economic redevelopment standpoint for Jackson Square. And we're looking at $6 million, down from $11 million. The plan recently passed muster and was approved by the Conservation Commission. And now we're working on, in fact, I had a meeting this morning with staff and Conservation to look at orders of conditions and construction protocols, and we want to ensure, and believe me, I have town departments here that are very concerned about ensuring that the project, especially during construction, that there aren't impacts to the herring run. And that's what the meeting today was about. So we've gotten our initial approval internally, and the permitting is moving forward. The money is set aside in our capital plan. We'll obviously have involvement from the council soon, and we're moving forward, and we would see construction start in the spring.
He doesn't put me up to saying this, folks, but I'm going to throw that out there. Bob, you've only been in office for what now, 10 months, and the tangible and physical developments that you can see have come pretty fast, I think. You see Columbian Square, we're talking about Jackson Square, we all see what's going on the landing. I mean, traditionally, the wheels of progress at the hospital or the government, move slowly, and everything's moving fast.
We got a lot of departments involved in this, from finance, chief of staff, recreation department, conservation, John McLeod, and others here in town that have, and DPW, because we're actually associated with this project. We're going to be finally, this has been, since I took office in 1990, it's been on the drawing board to fix the flood control gate in Jackson Square at the herring run. It's responsible
for 30 years almost?
20 years.
Holy smokes.
I mean, I remember having meetings in the mid-90s with state staff and local officials to look at that gate, which is responsible for at times a significant herring run fish kill, because the herring get confused with this flood control gate and go up that flood control culvert and die. And that's going to be fixed. That's a $500,000 component to this that will be fixed as part of the whole level field work too.
Wow.
So there's some other ancillary things going on down there with that's exciting. So I can't take the credit. There's great staff that have been doing a lot of good work on that stuff.
But like I said, I usually, with the governmental, in that arena, it's difficult to gauge progress sometimes because there's a lot of things going on behind the camera that you don't see. But these things are physical and people see it every day.
And you know what's funny?
It's
What's funny in my answer? I don't want other staff to be left out. I mentioned departments, and I mentioned one man's name only because I forgot his title. So I blanked out for a minute on that. So
I think
I didn't want to leave the impression we were singling one person out. So.
I think that's probably excusable in the lieu of, again, 10 months of service. And how many people does the town employ roughly? Is it
I don't
up
even
two,
know.
three? I know it's
forget.
in the
I forget
hundreds.
the number.
We figure you don't have everybody's name and title down just yet, but the test will come 12 months from now.
So are we done with Mr. Daly?
No, listen, why not wrap it up, because we're about to end this episode anyway. So one more time.
The Dan Daly episode.
Dan, listen, Dan, and you did a great job. Thanks. I hope you've inspired others, although we have
And this
certainly
is not,
plenty
and by the
of
way,
questions.
this is not, I believe, it's not the Dan Daly, because he's not a Weymouth resident, who ran for U.S. Senate and for Congress at one time in the last 20 years.
As soon as I saw this question and Dan's name, Mr. Daly, whoever you are, I think everybody knows at least one Dan Daly and probably two or three. So they're certainly out there on a lot of levels. But listen, here's your final question from Dan on this hit list. Recreation fees and field rentals, Mayor. What systems are in place to reconcile the field rental schedule against the actual dollars collected by the town? Are there any controls in place to ensure that all the entities are paying the correct amount, i.e. in-town cost versus profit for out of town? Are there checks and balances in places to ensure that those who rent the fields are actually paying for the time that's rented? I would imagine there is.
Yeah, and this was not this was in last taping's segment, and this was a great question which I didn't have an answer for. So we got a little cheat sheet on this one.
Good.
Which is why normally I don't have paper in front of me. And I like to do this spontaneously. But on this
Fire
one we had
away.
a cheat sheet. I looked into this. We have up-to-date registration software that's used to track everything. There are checks and balances on this. Most of the fees are paid online in advance, so there's not a lot of handling of cash, et cetera.
Meet Steve Riley out behind the outhouse down there, Legion
The
Field.
permitting and the invoicing is simultaneously, and the software generated reports are tracked monthly and everything. Funny story that when I first ran, I have a distant cousin, the same last name as me, that was the park and rec director in Braintree. And they had an issue with permit fees where some petty cash wasn't processed the way it was supposed to on a Friday afternoon. It was left in a desk drawer. And lo and behold, someone stole the petty cash out of the drawer. So there was a little It wasn't a large amount of money at all. It was chump change, but the procedure wasn't followed. So
Was there anyone in the evidence room in Braintree?
Yeah, no. Much smaller scale. But the guy's last name was Headland, and they took action and reprimanded him. So 2 weeks before my first election, there was a headline. There was a headline in the Patriot Ledger that said, "Headland reprimanded for missing money." And I'm running for state
inspires
senate.
me
I'm
to
running
vote.
for state senate, but they're referencing a park and rec director over in Braintree.
Hysterical. So did you have to do any time for that, or
I
they
did
let you off
not.
the
I did
hook?
not. But then later he did it. Then again later he did a geese hunt on the golf course, and it says Headland orders geese shot or something. The animal protection people are all over me. So
Well, it sounds like we got the good Headland in that deal, so we'll take the money and run, or maybe that was your cousin's, I'm not sure. Well, I think at the end of the day, that's going to wrap up another episode of Ask the Mayor. Please, once again, keep the questions coming in at askmayorbob@gmail.com. Thanks again, Mayor, for your candor and your conversation. And we remind everybody to stay tuned for My Favorite Martian coming up next.
good one.
If you have a question, please email the mayor at askmayorbob@gmail.com. That's askmayorbob@gmail.com. Maybe your question will be answered on the next episode of Ask the Mayor.